The current and particular crisis in the industry has to do with money. In recent weeks, CPBL has had difficulties in meeting payments to growers for the delivery of produce. Last week, it got to the point where a lack of working capital being extended to CPBL by its banks made it likely that the factory would stop operations. But after intensive discussions, PM Barrow is convinced that a way forward has been forged. In the immediate short term, First Caribbean International Bank has been persuaded to advance immediate working capital funds to keep the factory going. And then, GOB gets intimately involved.
The government of Belize is proposing to buy out the FCIB facility, buy out the loan that FCIB has with CPBL. The idea is that SSB will afterwards take that loan, government will unsell it to SSB, since in fact SSB is in the business of making loans, while the government of Belize is not, or only unusually so. And that ought to see then SSB stepping permanently into the shoes of FCIB.
PM Barrow is confident that the investment by the SSB will meet board and public approval, since he says the move makes sense practically and financially. And besides that, it is a strategic move on the citrus chessboard to make the king, in this scenario Banks Holdings Limited, vulnerable.
SSB, the proposal is, would also become a shareholder by way of the transfer of a portion of that 51% of the shareholding that's currently held by CGA. Now, that would come about in this way. CGA is indebted to SSB in the amount of about $9.1 million. CGA would liquidate the debt to SSB by way of this share swap. In other words, SSB would take $9.1 million worth of CGA's shareholding. What the transfer of this portion of the CGA shareholding to SSB would do would be to give SSB a 10% stake in CPBL. I've been provided with the figures by the chairman of SSB, Mr. Doug Singh. They haven't been passed by CJ yet, and so if there are any inaccuracies, we can clear that up later. But it seems like after the debt is converted to shares, the new structure would look something like this. CJ would have 41%, BHL would have 46.59%, SSB 10%, and other shareholders 2.41%.
And then it all falls into place. PM Barrow says that it has been agreed with all parties, including Banks Holdings Limited, that the board would then be reconfigured. CGA would appoint 2 directors. Banks Holdings would appoint 2. Heritage Bank would appoint 1. SSB would appoint 1. And GOB 1.
The hope is that all this would do 2 fundamental things. Number one, get us over the immediate financial hump insofar as CPBL is concerned, allow us to pay growers for fruit, and allow CPBL to keep marching on. Two, the reconfigured board with these 3 new directors to hold a balance between CJ on the one hand and Banks Holdings Limited on the other ought to be able to forge a new modus vivendi, if you will, ought to be able to usher in an era of peaceful coexistence at a minimum. I'm not sure that it isn't too much to expect that, in fact, everybody would hold hands and gather around the campfire and sing Kumbaya. But practically speaking, it appears that in terms of the 2 previously warring factions, there is a determination on both sides to allow this triumvirate of new directors to help to pour oil on troubled waters.
GOB would appoint a director only until the FCIB facility is unsold to SSB. SSB would then most likely appoint 2 directors. Mike Rodon for News 5.